It's John Bowden from Rock History Music, and a drummer that Eddie Van Halen considered one of the best in the world. And he's not alone. This is Rock History Music. In this segment, we're going to have some guests who have known and played with this great drummer. Eddie Van Halen, late great? Well, so was the drummer we're talking about. Most famous for being in the band Toto, one of the guys with one of the most consistent tight grooves in the history of music. Listen to the Rosanna Halftime Shuffle, built around Bernard Purdie's Shuffle and John Bonham's Fool in the Rain Shuffle. Everyone can remember Boskag Silt Degrees? Well, that was Jeff Porcaro. And he played on, just look him up on Wiki. It's a never-ending list of people he played with. And we've got special guests in this segment who have played with him, who knew him incredibly well. Sadly, we lost him in the summer of 1992. Jeff Porcaro, according to Eddie Van Halen, just one of the tightest drummers in the world. On Rock History Music.
Jeff and I, did a ton of sessions together. It's in the studio in LA. And a wry sense of humor, never down. And his sense of humor was because when you're in the studio, there's some crazy stuff that happens. Number one, if you're first call, which I'm proud to have been, those guys, there's a certain camaraderie, and there's also a certain cockiness. You're there because you're the pro from Dover. There's nothing you can't do. Or if there is, you're not going to say it, and you're going to do it anyway.
Jeff and I, Mike was the middle brother, and believe me, he was the middle brother. And Jeff and I kind of bumped heads quite a bit, especially when we were in the band together in terms of technology. And I'm being very much into it, and Jeff is all about groove and feel and hates that stuff. Hates click tracks and the stiffness. And I was going to do the song of mine, Leah, on the Fahrenheit album. And the demo I had done with just a drum machine loop. And we had talked about the guys who wanted to do the song, and they talked about how we would do it. And Jeff said, I think we should do like an acoustic loop, like, using a 24-track tape, make a loop like they did on Africa, which is very time-consuming and labor-intensive. And anyway, I just remember one morning waking up, and it was pouring rain. I love it when it rains, by the way. And it was Jeff on the phone saying, it looks like a great day to make a loop. And I went over to his studio, which is just a block away from where I am right now. And he had called up Steve Jordan. He called up Jim Keltner. He called up Lenny Castro. And, of course, my brother Mike and Luke and Paige were there. And he got all these drummers in a semicircle in his studio, and they made these loops for my song Leah. And it just was an amazing moment where kind of technology and groove kind of met in the middle there. It was a very cool moment for us.
In '94, I was on a tour, and we were in Japan, with Jay Graydon. It was the Jay Graydon All-Stars. And Steve Porcaro was in the band, and we were just about to hop on the plane to fly over to Sweden and just Scandinavia in general. And Steve Porcaro came walking in, and he showed me, he says, look, I got a CD of the Loosen Up album, Loosen Up Naturally album. And I said, oh my God, I went next door. The record store was closed. I said, I didn't even know anybody had that out. I said, can I buy it from you? He said, you don't get it. When I was a kid, I was in the room next to Jeff Porcaro's. And one time he came home, and I had taken his LP of Loosen Up Naturally. I was listening to it in my room. And Jeff didn't like me playing his records, so I was listening to it in my room. Jeff came home early, opened the door, and the record was on. And he very quietly took the needle off the record, put it back in the thing, brought it back to his room, came back in and beat the shit out of me. This record means an awful lot to me. He said, don't touch my records,
Jeff was always the light in the room. And it's so odd that he should die young, because he was the one who was so alive. And he was so kind to me. I was like a shitty guitar player. I wrote good songs. They flew me out there. I'm sitting with all these guys who are like unbelievable players. And I remember I played, I'd never played in the studio before. And I was playing it, and I remember Jeff going, "Get Jordan out of my headphones," because my time was so bad, right? And I didn't know how to play with these guys, and they were so great, and they were so generous and so wonderful to me.
Where would Jeff be now, you think?
Oh, God. He was such a homebody. I mean, he loved his family. He would just be on steroids. I mean, not on steroids, but just, that's metaphorically speaking. Just whatever he was then, he would have get more refined and more refined, you know, and I can't say enough about him. He was my partner, and he was so imaginative. He was responsible for all the covers, anything artistic that we did that we liked, he was involved with heavily. You know, he could have been an artist. He can draw freehand, you know, and so he can design albums and he can storyboard videos and he does all this stuff.
Jeff comes in with an album, her first album, and he said, "Here, put this up. We got to dig this." And so we put it up and we're listening to it. He played on one track on that album, on her first album. And I saw, you know, wow, what a talent, you know, just great talent. So the next album, Jeff gets called to do the drumming. And so he goes in and they start running the song down, whatever it was. And he's in a booth and she's in a booth and she's sitting there. Jeff tells me the story. She's sitting there and they run it down and she goes, "Drummer, I don't like the way you're playing that. Try something else," you know, and just, you know, Jeff was not exactly an egotistical person, but I don't think he enjoyed being disrespected either. And, you know, for an artist not to be able to know the name of the musician she's working with. Anyway, that kind of continued. And it got to, they were cutting the track and she stopped it in the first chorus and she said, "Play a different fill going into the chorus." He went, "Okay." So they run down the song again and he plays a different fill. And she said, no, try this. Doom, chicka, doom, boom, boom, ba, doom, doom. And he goes, okay. And so they started again. And she's, as it's coming up, she stops her rough vocal, you know, stops singing to say, "Drummer, play it hard, play it really hard." And so he goes, okay. And he took his sticks on end and did the fill, stabbing each head, chink, chicka, kunk, kunk, gunk, and bam, ended with the snare with the stick sitting up, got up and walked out.
You know, God bless Jeff. And when Jeff passed away, there was a kind of a split in the camp. And I was told, even though I would have never taken the gig, that
Why?
I could not imagine trying to duplicate his vibe every night. It would have been cool for maybe a month, and then I would have gotten really depressed.
Fast forward to 92, I'm doing this TV show and Bobby Kimball is also there. And we're staying in this beautiful place out in it's all country, I guess, you know, somewhere in Ibiza. One telephone in a booth right outside the reception. It's very country, you know. And I was walking down for breakfast and I saw Bobby and he was on the phone and he saw me and turned around and went, you know, like this and said, "You're not going to believe this, Jeff Porcaro just died." I went, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm finding out about it now." I said, "Oh no." You know, so that was the first thing I heard.
What was it like growing up with your dad? When you have three guys that do what you guys did, I mean, there's something going on in that house.
You know, you might easily think there was some kind of great Santini thing going on where we were like, you know, practicing at gunpoint or something like that, which so wasn't the case.
You can hear his impact on songs like, I'm just thinking of "I Can't Stop Loving You," the middle section, and all that. It's just so loud. It's like almost, it sounds like you're listening to a live drummer, you know, right in your ear. But you just hear the passion. You can hear this, you know, his mannerisms and how he plays. And yeah, besides all the other cool effects.
Every time I worked with him on any session, there was this tremendous wave of confidence, like with everybody else that I worked with. And Jeff had good jokes.
I'll tell you, I love Jeff, and I remixed something years ago from the Mannequin record, and I heard Jeff speak, between takes on the 2-inch. Yeah, that's it. But I heard Jeff talking in the studio, and that was about 10 years ago. It was just wonderful to hear his voice because he had been dead for a while, right? And it just took me back. And he was a lovely, I just can't say enough about him. He's just a lovely guy.
One of, if not the greatest drummer I've played with, and definitely my favorite drummer to play with anybody. The shorthand, he just picks up on songs instantaneously. I mean, 20 seconds into a song, he has the whole vibe down, and it's just, you just play. It's like playing to a machine. I was like playing to literally a machine that can think, you know.
But his playing was, how can I describe this? Was inviting. In other words, some players play in a box. And, it's nice that you're there, but, he's here, you're here, you're here. Jeff's playing was inviting. His playing style was like an open book. So when you played with him, you could peer into the structure of what he was doing. And besides the fact that it was just great, no matter what, it was joyous, it was fun. There was never, we did a lot of serious work, but we never obsessed about it. And he was, like I say, very inviting. And it was wonderful to play with him.
I got a call at about midnight in England from Lukather, who was in a meeting. Obviously, they're 8 hours behind. They were in a meeting at Fitzgerald Hartley, which was their management company up in Ventura. He said, I said, hey, Luke, and I knew him, but not very well, but I knew him. And I said, hey, Luke, I said, and I just thought he was calling me to maybe tell me about Jeff or maybe talk about him or just, want just a friendly call. And he said, look, I'll come straight to the point. Will you come and play with us? I went, huh? Really? He said, yeah, we've got a 42-day tour booked, world tour, promoting our new album. We've got 40 people on the payroll. We're here trying to make a decision about whether we should do this tour. If you'll join us, we'll do the tour. And I went, wow, how soon is this going to happen? He said, as soon as you can make it. We got to rehearse. We've never rehearsed with anybody else before in the drum chair. Yeah. And I went, okay. So, well, look, I need some time to think about this. He said, well, don't take too long, please. And I went, okay. So I put down the phone. I was like, Toto? Me? Wow. That's... So I think I'd asked him, well, you send the album. Let me hear the new album and stuff. So they shipped that over. In those days, of course, we didn't have internet like we do now. I'm not sure if we even had it. We had computers, but so they put it in FedEx, I think, overnight, which just means 4 days to get to England. And I started to look at, I was just about to start a record the very next day in London with a band called The Big Country, or Big Country. Yeah. Buffalo Skinners was the name of the record. And I had a load of stuff booked, and I started ringing people. I just said, look, I know that I'm booked to do your record on September, whatever it is, but I've just been asked by Toto to play with them for their world tour. I'm going to have to cancel. Is that okay? And everybody's reaction was incredibly favorable. I think there was one person who was a little put out. I think it was to do with Amsterdam, so it might have been a Dutch thing I was doing. But basically everybody said, totally understand, huge fan of Toto, so sad about Jeff. Yeah. Absolutely, no problem.
Remember, make sure you subscribe to our channel, join our Patreon, get early access to our videos. You can make a donation to the channel. There's a link in the very top of the description. Buy a t-shirt, spread the word. I'm John Bowden from Rock History Music.